It's a challenging time to be a teacher. We don't get paid a lot, the days can be long and exhausting, demands from students, parents, admins, and districts can be intense. There's always room for improvement and there is always more to do. There are always new procedures to learn, new programs to run, new strategies to master. But it's when our fire burns the lowest that we remember our purpose. We teach because we're resilient. We teach because we're problem solvers. We teach because investing in kids is one of the highest callings we can imagine. We teach because we know that the classroom can be a place of magic and possibility. We teach because we have an unquenchable fire for learning and a passion to share it. We teach because our colleagues are some of the best human beings we will ever meet. We teach because we have an opportunity to influence the global citizens that will make this world a better place. If you're still on fire for learning and growth, join the Teachers on Fire Roundtable for conversations that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your practice. You'll hear from real people and real educators with real solutions, not make-believe perfection, but ideas, inspiration, and a path toward change and transformation in K-12 education today. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I'm inviting you to join us at the Teachers on Fire Roundtable. Because you matter, your voice is important, and we are all better together. Good morning and welcome back to another conversation that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. And I'm so excited to be joined today by representatives from a group called the Knowledge Society. And this morning also marks an important first, and that is having students on the broadcast, which gets me really excited. So welcome here. We are going to hear from our guests in just a moment, but if you are joining us live, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you are coming from, and we would love to say hello to you. So I am going to throw it over to my guest this morning. Would you tell us briefly who you are and what does your context in education look like right now? Starting with you, Jessica.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm a rising senior at University Hill Secondary in Vancouver, BC. And I'm really interested in neuroscience, medicine, and the ways biotech can shape the scope of human health.
All right. Welcome here, Jessica. BJ.
Hi, my name is BJ or Byungjin, and I'm a rising senior attending Walnut Grove Secondary School in Langley, British Columbia, Canada. I'm interested in startups, nonprofits, public policy, emerging tech, and how all of these fields come together to create a larger social impact.
All right. Thanks for being here, BJ. And Stephen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen. I'm a director at TKS for both Vancouver and virtual. Before this, I created a longevity startup out of the University of Waterloo called Acorn. Went through Y Combinator, raised a couple million, grew a team, launched a product, and went through that experience. And through that experience, I met some of the students and founders at TKS, and I fell in love with the mission. And now here I am representing them on a podcast.
All right. Well, this is very fun. I can't wait to get into this further and find out more about what the Knowledge Society is. We'll do that in just a moment. First of all, I want to say hi to Mark, who is over in the UAE. Hello, Mark. Thanks for joining us tonight where you are. And Damien on LinkedIn, watching from Ottawa. Thanks for joining us, Damien. And back to Mark, he says, Jessica, check out a company called Mendy. Okay, well, you'll have to tell us more off air about that. But let's get into the questions. So starting with Stephen, tell us more about the Knowledge Society. That's the theme of our conversation here this morning. So what is the Knowledge Society and what is its mission?
So we like to frame ourselves as a human accelerator. As I'm sure you're aware, there are startup accelerators. So these are organizations that take startup founders and their ideas and they try to position them, whether it's by introducing them to certain people, mentors, giving them financing, whatever it takes to make it more likely that they will succeed in a big way. And we have a similar mindset, but for people. And so we've targeted high school students where we believe they are at a place in their life where they are just discovering what their passions are, what their new priorities will be, what is going to excite them. And we've created a community of students around these ideas of science, technology, emerging technologies as being this thing that is the most likely to superpower them to make a positive impact on the world. So yeah, I'd say like we're a community. Our directors all have unique experiences, whether it's in startups, science, or technology. And so together with our network of mentors that work in places like AI, some of us have mentor friends in quantum or bioengineering, like myself. We come together to, I think, create an environment that allows these students that have more ambition and more desire than the kind of like normal amount that they would get through high school to see that potential through, to be able to do a lot more with it.
Okay, so I'm just going to follow up on one thing that you said there, and that is, this is geared at high school students. It obviously, allows them to take part in all sorts of studies and projects that they wouldn't normally have access to. I think I heard the word startup in there. Could high school students end up in a project or projects that continue on past high school right into a startup? Is that possible?
Yeah. And in fact, it's happened several times with
Wow.
our past students. Yeah. And we, obviously it's a conversation with students and parents and like what they want to do with their lives. But, often you see students, even before this whole kind of startup-y thing, taking a gap year between high school and university to travel the world or to just do something experientially. That wasn't necessarily university right away. And so now we're seeing some students decide to do a startup in that time. And of course, that's even more, gives them more experience that is relevant to what they're about to do if that startup doesn't continue to succeed in their first year of university right after.
All right. Well, that's an interesting world. I happen to be reading a book about the Netflix story right now, and I think the title of the book is "That'll Never Work." So I just love being connected with those stories and hearing more. Now, Netflix, obviously, not a great example of the sort of work that your students do, but nevertheless, a startup story that obviously worked. All right, let's get into this with the students. And I'll start with Jessica here. Tell us about your experiences with TKS. How long have you been connected, first of all? And tell us about one of your favorite learning experiences.
Yeah, for sure. So I joined September last year, and going in, I was pretty skeptical. I saw the website and all the amazing projects, and I thought, this seems like a stretch. I can't believe high schoolers are actually doing this. But I joined, and it was such a transformative experience. We got to work on so many real world problems, and I think definitely one of the most memorable experiences this year was the global challenge. So TKS partnered with the United Nations, and then our project was to create essentially like a proposal to increase girls' digital access and literacy. And then my team, I worked with a couple friends from Ottawa, and we focused on Kenya, specifically Nairobi. Our solution was to implement a tech mentorship program in all girls secondary boarding schools to teach 14 to 17-year-olds technical and business skills that would let them pursue tech after secondary school. And our deck was one of the 11 that was actually sent to the United Nations, which is just crazy to think about. And yeah, that was definitely such an impactful experience because it taught us how to think critically, how to take data from a bunch of different sources and analyze it. And there was no solution in the back of the textbook. It was a real world problem, and we came up with a real world solution for it.
Now, when you say you were sent to the United Nations or you were invited, however that happened there, was that a United Nations event or was that a TKS? Because I know TKS has chapters all over the place. Was that a UN or a TKS sort of gathering?
I would say it's both. And Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but TKS partnered with UN Women, and the top decks were sent to the United Nations for review.
All right.
That's correct.
Very
yeah,
cool.
It was more of a partnership.
Okay. Very fun. It was such a thrill to finally get to the UN myself last year and sort of tour that complex. And I can't imagine as a student being able to go there and represent your ideas. That must have been so exciting. Same question to you, BJ. Again, tell us about your experiences. How long have you been connected, and what is one highlight for you?
So I joined TKS program as an innovator, which is like the first year student in September 2020. So it's been exactly a year. First, walking in, I was fascinated by the network of mentors, and through that mentorship, I was able to build really cool decks. So one of my favorite learning experiences was challenges. During our first challenge with a nonprofit called 501c3, which is a nonprofit backed by Jaden Smith, we developed like an analysis deck on using a water quality sink solution to resolve issues that people were facing in Flint, Michigan, and New York State. We would analyze the different factors such as affordability, data collection methods, feasibility, specific specs of the water sensing solution provided to propose a renewed solution which reduced the cost like 5 times from a 35% of a household's weekly income to 7% of weekly income and expand the usability of sensors in diverse situations so that over 3 million Americans could benefit from this solution while including mobile app for the user, as we found out that over 84% of the Flint population had at least one smartphone. So, like this solution from analysis would impact over 28,000 households out of Flint's 40,000 households. So, working on things like this is such a cool experience because you're actually able to provide an input on real life issues. And in a small scale, like what's happening in Flint, um, it is such a realistic challenge, and the fact that we're able to contribute to this big crisis, it's a huge motivating factor for me. That's one of the reasons why TKS was such an interesting experience for me.
Amazing, amazing story. Thanks for sharing that as well. Yeah, the Flint crisis is well documented. If you've been living under a rock and you're not familiar with it, Flint, Michigan has had a major shortage, major disruption in their water supply, and what an opportunity to be able to. I mean, it doesn't get more real world than that. People have been in a bad way in that area, and I'm not actually sure if it is fully resolved. Do you know, BJ, if the Flint water supply situation has been resolved today, or is that something that they continue to work on?
Of course, I do not believe, or it is factually not an issue that is completed. Um, I know some top decks. We weren't, unfortunately, the top decks from the entire cohort. But I know a few of my friends in LA and other cities were able to actually directly work with Jaden Smith and their nonprofit over the summer to implement these or their solutions or their proposals, taking also in account of other students' decks and try to make it a reality. So it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's something that can be resolved in a matter of days or months.
Yeah, yeah, that is, I'm sure, something that will be ongoing. Well, something that I am a huge believer in is this idea of the growth mindset, and another related idea that our brains grow the most when we are stretched or confronted with initial failure. And that's something that to me is so revolutionizing. I think it is for adults. I think it is for students too, because when you're stuck in that fixed mindset, the work gets difficult, and the narrative that students hear in their minds is, I'm dumb. I can't do this. And in fact, I should try not to do this. I'll try to avoid this, right? And I think we've all heard that as human beings at one time or another. But when you're in that growth mindset, you actually lean into those situations of frustration and adversity and recognize, wow, my brain is being stretched here. There's some potential for growth and improvement. So Jessica, I'll go back to you on this one. Talk about maybe a learning experience that you've had that was, if you don't mind, something that was really frustrating and difficult, and then talk about how you pushed through that.
I love how you bring up growth mindset, because something that TKS really emphasized was this mindset of anti-fragility, where we would learn from challenges and grow as people as a result. And for me, I think the way I applied it the most was networking and cold outreach, because I noticed this consistent pattern of self-rejection where I would want to talk to this really cool researcher I looked up to, but there was this ongoing narrative that I'm a random 16-year-old and they have a PhD and all these publications. Why would I waste their time? And so as a result, I ended up causing myself to miss out on a ton of opportunities. But something I did was just challenge myself, like thinking that when the worst thing that can happen is status quo, why not take the shot? Because honestly, if they didn't reply, what would happen? Maybe my feelings would get hurt. I'd move on in a day, whatever. So, so I started like just reaching out to professors and people I looked up to, and the results were huge. I ended up being able to talk to like this one professor from Johns Hopkins, which I didn't think was possible, and getting positions in labs too as a result. And so it was just a really impactful like learning experience of how challenging myself and sort of leaning into discomfort can yield so many benefits.
That is a great story. Thanks, Jessica. And by the way, with a Medium page like yours, I'm not surprised that you're able to access some higher ups. So I hope that's something we can touch on here at the end. I want to give BJ the same question, but I also want to circle back. We had a great question that I was kind of wondering as well. Let me see if I can find it here. From Mark in the UAE, he says, can you explain DEX? So, BJ, you were using that term a few times. Can you explain what DEX are? And I think I had a sense that you're sort of making submissions or proposals, but can you talk about that?
Yeah. So decks are essentially slide decks, and it really depends on what challenge. Yeah, it's a slide deck with obvious things inside.
Got it.
Decks.
Got it. Mark, it's just it's what the cool kids call slide decks now. So we're good. We're good. So I'll go back to you, VJ, on this question of adversity. I love these stories of like you're ready to pull your hair out, you're ready to quit on the project. This internal voice is telling you you're over your head, but you push through. Do you have a story that you can share along those lines?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, a couple months back, the last challenge that we worked on was the Moonsha challenge, where Jessica and I teamed up. So Jessica and two of our friends and I, we created this product called Kinesi, which is basically a a product that we use a minimally invasive brain-computer interface implanted the front medial portion of the brain, as well as like electrical pairs and the KT app. We enabled like paralyzed patients to rehabilitate. So two things. One thing is the idea itself, and the second thing is the team. First thing is that moonshot challenges are challenges for us to solve an important problem or enable a very interesting futuristic feature. That's not really word. But yeah. But that something that could be realized in the next like 5 to 10 years. So
Right.
through this challenge, we train the mindset of like thinking 10x, moving beyond incremental thought. Or not only that, we have to come up with unconventional ideas that we truly fall in love with, and being able to find that idea and explore that field, is just it's not an easy process. I actually still have this paper that the product was based on. Yeah, we had to read a bunch, and I'm speaking like a lot of research papers on BCIs, on like electrical simulation systems, in order to fall in love with the topic and being able to dive into those like higher level intelligent papers is something that TKS really challenges us and like pushes us to do. And the second thing really is teamworking. The way we teamwork or work together in TKS is completely different from what we do at school. For example, the majority of the program last year was virtual, and that being said, Jessica, me, and two other friends, we had to go on Zoom. We had to work on Slack. We had to send each other documents. We had to share our screen every couple of minutes, really. And also, there's this part about remote working, right? Where compared to IRL, like in-person working, remote working is a more stressful process. We did have some like internal like team conflicts. Being able to manage those team conflicts and being able to like de-escalate those, as well as being able to figure things out, that is something that you don't really learn in
Mm.
school because you just don't have the opportunity to really experience that moment. So something like that is what makes TKS unique, and what makes us unique. Being able to go through that really helped us become a better person in not only just as leaders but as human beings. So there's that.
Yeah, well said. I love the piece about the interpersonal conflict. Actually, we're heading into that next, talking about the something called the 5 Cs, or here in BC we call them the core competencies. Erica on Facebook, thanks for joining us this morning, Erica. She says, love that fall in love with a subject. That was something you said a moment ago, BJ, and that's music to any teacher's ears. We've also got a mysterious person watching from India, LinkedIn user. So we don't have a name there, but welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Stephen, just to give you a heads up, I'll bring you in here. I'll give you a shot at this next question. So educators talk a lot about the 5 Cs: communication, collaboration, creative thinking, critical thinking, and I'm going to add curiosity. Can you talk about how your TKS works? So we'll go to the students first. When you look at that list of skills, can you focus on one and tell us how's your project work sharpened one of those skills? I mean, BJ, you just talked about the collaborative piece and how that can be a challenge. Jessica, what comes to mind for you when you look at that list?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind for sure is curiosity, because I remember last school year feeling a bit frustrated, almost that like school and the classes could sometimes take away from me pursuing what I felt like curious about.
School's
Um,
getting in the way.
to an extent, because I remember really vividly, like one biology test, we were learning about viruses, and I thought this was so cool, and I wanted to go like deeper, more niche, but I reminded myself this isn't going to be on the test. That's like way too in depth. So instead of like sort of exploring that area I thought was really cool, I focused on content that I knew would be tested. And I remember that really prominently because being in TKS allowed me to, like, on one hand, balance school, but on the other, just pursue what I was naturally curious about. And that led to a bunch of like new ideas, projects, moonshot hackathons, like BJ mentioned. And so I think curiosity is definitely what I think TKS let me explore the most.
That is, again, that's just music to my ears when I hear that. And, BJ referenced having to go through graduate level journal articles. I mean, the one you flashed on the screen there looked pretty in depth. I know most educators would not be too excited about reading that level of content. So the idea that high schoolers are digging that deep into viruses, Jessica, and these other areas is fascinating. BJ, again, I'll show you the list here of 5 Cs. We've got communication, collaboration, creative thinking, critical thinking, and curiosity. Jessica referenced curiosity. What comes to your mind in terms of something that you've seen your own personal skills really develop in through your work at TKS?
My take on this would be communication. I think that's something that's overly emphasized in school. I think that's overly emphasized everywhere in society, in our daily interactions with people. I think communication is something that's still underrated.
All
People think,
right.
oh yeah, like communication is so important, guys. It's so important. But there's just so much like parts to that than just saying that it's important. Communication is really important for us, TKS students, in the sense that we're literally on the internet 24/7. Being able to communicate with people online is a whole different experience than being able to interact with people face to face.
Yeah.
I personally have troubles being able to describe my feelings sometimes online by
Sure.
text. I was having trouble being able to professionally produce my deck with professional language. I really think communication is something something that TKS wouldn't be able to help you master, but something that it definitely does a big part in helping you in. Um, I think that's just a lifelong skill that you can't really master, but I would argue that TKS does a really great job of improving that skill.
It puts you in situations where you're sort of that growth is sort of required, right? You're sort of pushed a little bit, and I hear that in what you're saying. Now, Jessica and BJ, I'm thinking about your groups working on different projects. In terms of that communication, what's your go-to app or platform? Is it Discord?
Slack.
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 Okay. Stephen, I'll turn that same question over to you again with the 5 C's. Do you have anything to add in terms of some of the skills? I mean, you've worked with many other students as well. Where do your thoughts go?
I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between creative thinking and critical thinking. I think, like, for example, with the Moonshot Hackathon that we put on, we try to a template off of what Google did with Google X, right? They kind of just allowed a bunch of their engineers to go after these big ideas that are very unlikely to work, but that required technologies that weren't quite yet available. And so we made our students do a challenge like that. And it made them have to use their sort of vision of what the future could be like. And, these are our youngest people. You guys are going to get to experience the most technological progress. And so you have the most benefit from having a good vision of what the future will look like. So it forced them, by saying like, okay, wait, technologies that don't exist yet today, and therefore business models and like ways of using that technologically that aren't yet being used. How can we have, like, it forces you to think creatively. It forces you to think that way. But then also like critical thinking. I think like, there are a lot of examples of startups that seemed like really good ideas in the past, but that completely failed. They didn't go anywhere. And the question is why? Everybody in the room thought, yes, this is great. The market is there. The product seems perfect. The technology is there. And yet it didn't actually pan out in a way that made sense for the world. And why? Right? Like, and those nuances are super important for our students to know, because they're going to stumble into these kind of like little ruts where it's like, oh, it feels like a good idea, but why in these sort of like nuanced critical thinky ways are they not potentially? So I think it's a combination of both that leads people to spend years of their lives devoted to an idea that really deserves that time. So yeah, I hope I didn't misfire here by answering two of them, but I like both of those.
No, that was great. And I think that critical thinking piece is so difficult because, on the one hand, when you're going into a startup, you have to have a certain amount of faith in the end goal, whether it's solving a water purification problem or a genetic problem or starting a business. Whatever it is, you sort of have to have some faith in what you can't see. And then on the other side, you have to be able to say, at some point, no, this is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
We watch The Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, and we see these pitches where people have worked for 7 years and sacrificed everything,
Yeah.
and it just missed the mark, right? Because they weren't thinking critically. Maybe they didn't have the right voices speaking into their project. I want to say a quick hello to Livia Chan, an educator here in Burnaby, who's dropping by to say hello. Now, I'm looking forward to hearing what our students will say to this question. Thinking about your K-12 school experience, you're both still in it right now. What is something you would change about the shape or the nature of school? What would your dream school look like? Jessica, you teased us a little bit in terms of, wishing you had the opportunity to do that deeper dive when you strike that subject that arouses your curiosity. Is there anything else that comes to mind in terms of what you would like to do, or your idea, let's say, of a dream school?
Yeah, I think to expand on that a little, something that kind of frustrates me with, I guess, like the current state of school is that there can be this hyperfixation on numbers and grades and academics. And obviously, like, that makes sense because we need some standardized way of measuring excellence. But in certain school environments, I've found the emphasis on academia can cause like really competitive behavior between students, which makes school less about its original purpose, learning and growth, and more about like getting perfect marks or trying to game the system so that you can have like as great of number as possible. And so for that reason, my dream school would be probably someplace that operates on an entirely holistic, maybe pass fail system, so that it places less emphasis on the importance of numbers and more on the value of the individual.
Wow, that is amazing to hear. That's something that rings true, I think, for a lot of educators right now. And one of the biggest obstacles, Jessica, as I'm sure you know in your world, is that it always comes back, that conversation at the high school or secondary level always comes back to college and university admission. That's what everyone is concerned about. But I am with you 100%. BJ, what about you? What would you like to change about school?
So I love to ramble about this on my Twitter, but I guess like two things.
Twitter,
One thing,
yes.
yeah. Well, I think one thing. First thing is I agree with Jessica. I think there is so much, or so many things to improve on upon the system of grades, and I guess also the biasness of our entire system. In a sense, there is still a very big discrepancy in, or personally, I believe, in our education system, which is that there isn't a consistent feedback loop, making it an open system for all. Um, that's what we're missing in BC's public school system, is that when we have an open complaint, a completely valid complaint against a certain way of teaching, a certain curriculum, there isn't an open or a direct way for students to reach out to people who are actually administering this, or people who are responsible for this curriculum, to voice their opinion and talk about how we can make this better. Because I personally believe that students are going to be really good at giving good feedbacks, solid feedbacks to make this better. And what we've seen so far in BC is that there hasn't been that open feedback loop, and the system was just still there. So that's one of my problems. One of the problems that I have with this uh, system. And I guess the second thing is that there is um, no definition of personalized learning. My teacher, my science teacher, Tim Stevenson, he's really known for his project-based learning things. That's where I got inspired. That's where I genuinely had the freedom to work on whatever I wanted to, but also being able to fulfill my learning and fulfill the curriculum. Tests might not be for everyone. Um, Sometimes, like essays or like art projects might not be for everyone. There should be alternative ways for students to demonstrate their learning. If you're in a science class and teacher asks you to create a visual project on stem cells, and if one of the criteria is the visual aspect of it, I think that's really absurd in so many sense. I think, like in an economics class, if you're asked to create a slide deck or a presentation, and if you're being judged by the non-analytics econ part of your presentation, I think that's absurd. I think there should be more ways for students to present what they learn in econ, not just through slide decks, through posters or through like videos. Um, there is a big shift towards that currently, at least in my school. But I do believe that it has to be adopted in so many other places. In order to make this a fair system for all, because some kids just might not be the best in memorization, and although they understand the course content, they don't get the grades that they deserve. I think that's unfair. So that's what I believe.
Well said, BJ. And what I'm hearing from a lot of what you said is more voice and more choice. And that resonates absolutely. Well, we're starting to wrap up here. And Livia dropped by again to say really good points from BJ and Jessica. Erica says yes to videos, including green screen. Students should be able to utilize that. Erica's a big green screen advocate, absolutely. And Livia is back to say, yes, more voice and choice. So as we start to wrap up, and Stephen, maybe I'll keep you on your toes and drop this question for you. When we think about the Knowledge Society, we've heard about these phenomenal projects and activities that Jessica and BJ and, of course, so many other students are involved in while they sort of on the side of their high school experience. Who else should think about joining the Knowledge Society and why?
Well, I mean, basically any student that is turned on by these kind of subjects. I think typically when you're in high school, you tend to get wrapped up in the sort of like normal social hierarchies that just you slip into as any kind of kid would. But then being kind of like becoming aware of the fact that there's a community of people that think this stuff is sort of like a different hierarchy to focus on, a different set of priorities to have that arguably, you know, for us is way more important and more meaningful. If those kind of things turn you on as a student or as teachers listening, if you think there are students that would be excited by that kind of community and that kind of set of priorities and like new, social hierarchy standard, those are the kind of people that should reach out. And like, you know, our students are reaching out to other students all the time and other experts. And so like, you know, it's already kind of like just a network naturally. So, you know, if you want to reach out to Jessica or BJ, you know, I'm sure they'd be happy to say hi and give you a little bit of like an intro as to how TCAS works and what their experience is like. But otherwise, feel free to go on our website, check it out. Those kind of students with a little bit more ambition that have a little more desire to do and that who haven't quite found an outlet to do it yet.
Jessica, what would be your pitch to high school students interested in the Knowledge Society? How would you sort of not sell it to them? You're not selling anything, but what would be your pitch or your invitation to them?
I think I would say that the biggest, well, not really selling point, but thing that draws most people to TKS is the community, because suddenly you're surrounded in a place of over 1,000 like-minded students who are all ambitious like you, who believe that you don't need to wait until university or like a master's or a PhD to make an impact on the world. You can start now, and they are itching to start now. And so surrounded by that community of people, you can make truly amazing things happen. You can positively impact the world and see the results of the change you make. And so I would say that if you want to be a part of that community and make that kind of change happen in the world, then TKS would be for you.
Now, Jessica, I'll stick with you for a second. When in your work with TKS, you've collaborated with different teams. Are the teams, the project teams, always local, or have you done some global partnerships as well? And apologies if I missed this earlier.
There have been global ones. I think for different cities, it depends, because usually we stick with the same time zone. Like, for example, West Coast, it would be Vancouver paired with LA paired with Las Vegas, just because it makes it easy for the directors to work on that together. But I was a rebel. I had some really good friends in Ottawa, and then we convinced the directors to let us team up. So I would say it's really flexible in terms of teams. And I remember for the Moonshot company, we wanted people, it had to be people from the same city, because that just made it more convenient to be like co-founders together and to work together. So yeah, it depends, but there's lots of freedom with it.
That is good to hear. I've got friends in Ottawa as well, and I know firsthand just from doing this show that the time zones kind of drive me crazy sometimes, and that's just North America. When we get into connections overseas, that can be really challenging. BJ, what would be your pitch? The Knowledge Society. Why should other high schoolers think about joining?
If you think I'm cool, if you think we're cool, do it. The thing is, one of the most often heard arguments about TKS is that people claim that, oh yeah, you can do this without paying for tuition, or you can do all that cool things like artificial intelligence or like biotech, whatever, without the program. Yes, you can, but I can tell you that over 99.9% of the chance, like people don't do it
Right.
because one, it's just incomparable how much a big network we have, how much of a great like support network, mentorship network we have, and what Jessica mentioned, we have a big alumni network. This past summer, I was able to meet people, like friends that I've worked with in LA and New York City. Being able to meet them in person, um, was a really cool experience, but also it didn't feel awkward at all. You're making friends online, but you're making the friends that you really need later in your life. All of Everyone in the community is just so inspiring. Everyone has a cool thing that they can share with each other, and being able to learn from them is a really humbling experience. And if you're into that, definitely sign up for a program. I would strongly recommend it. But that's my two
That
cents.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those 2 cents. Absolutely. I was thinking, BJ, while you were talking, that's something we always try to encourage teachers to do is to reach out beyond your own building. I mean, it's a big world out there. And if you've got a unique set of interests and passions and drive, guaranteed there are others out there, even if they're not in your own context. There are others that you can connect with and work together with. So I'm curious, actually, you mentioned meeting some global friends this summer. Where did you meet? Was it in Vancouver?
No, it's a long story, but I traveled
Okay.
to New York and LA. Um,
Ah,
I met TKS alumni from previous years in LA. They were building really cool things like Lunch Club, for example, another like startup. And I met the founders of TKS as well, David and Nadim. And in LA, I also met with a couple of friends that I've worked with for also different challenges and through different like meetings such as Velocity, where we train mindsets. It was just a really cool experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, how can other educators support the Knowledge Society? And tell us briefly, what are your next goals as an organization? Are you looking to open more chapters, or what does the future hold?
Yeah, okay, good question. So I think the number one here is just if you know students that you think would be a good fit for our community, who you think are ambitious and driven and would like maybe learn unconventionally and but would be turned on by these ideas and subjects, and maybe they're not very grades based, but as thinkers they are still, they have a lot of potential. I'd love to see them sent our way so we can kind of assess whether they'd be a good fit. If you're excited by what we're doing and you think you have ideas, like you kind of get a sense for how we operate, what kinds of mindsets we're bringing from this kind of Silicon Valley-esque wisdom to our students, and you are excited by that, you have ideas, feel free to reach out to me even directly or anyone else at TKS. Obviously, I'm the director in Vancouver, so it might make more sense if you're from Vancouver, but a director from a different city for sure. We're all ears. We're very open-minded about modifying what we do and making sure it's updated. And if you have ways of learning that we aren't utilizing that you think are kind of like new and interesting, we'd love to hear ideas as well. And then if you know experts, so if a friend of yours is an expert in machine learning, and you think some of the students in our cohorts that are working on machine learning could utilize an expert like that, that's great. Introductions are always good. We're growing our mentor network beyond our personal networks into external networks as well. So I think those are some of the main ways that you could help. And then for your second question here, how are we growing as an organization? I think like every decision we make stems down from this kind of thought that we want to increase the likelihood that through our efforts at TKS, we are going to create unicorn people. So the students that at some point in the next decade are going to impact 1 billion people. And that sounds very ambitious, but it's kind of like our North Star. So everything that we do revolves around that. We're not necessarily looking to, grow the number of students that we have and double it from, this kind of hundreds to thousands necessarily. I think mostly it's like making a name for ourselves in the cities that we're in so that the students that we have can have even more unconventional, interesting opportunities and network with even more, big companies so that they can see the potential of those students and those students can grow even faster. That's kind of the core of what we're doing in terms of growth right now. So yeah, I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
No, for sure. I love hearing the sort of the vision of growth, and just like any startup, you don't want to sort of be all over the place. You want it to be calculated and intentional. Well, we are closing. It is time to say goodbye, but as we do so, please let us know, how can we join your learning journeys? Now, normally I'm throwing this question out to educators. We've got some students here today, which takes us into some interesting territory, because educators are generally told not to follow students. But I think in terms of LinkedIn profiles, and you are upper level secondary, I think we're all good there. So I'll just say, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your parents have green lighted, go ahead and share with us. So BJ, I'll start with you. How can we connect with you and follow your journey?
So I actually write a quarterly newsletter. So shameless plug, go to bjmoon.io. It's bjmoon.io. And if you go to the bottom of the page, there is a way you can subscribe to my newsletter. That's where I often formally share what I'm up to and what I've been doing and what I'm going to be doing in the future. Um, Alternatively, you can always follow my Twitter. Views are my own. I do post some like my hot takes on education and really cool startup things. So that's something. And obviously, my name Byungjun Moon on LinkedIn. That is where I also post updates regarding my newsletters. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. We will check that out. And by the way, that's sort of a universal Twitter disclaimer, right? These views are just my own. I love the idea, by the way, that you two are building LinkedIn profiles. I wish more high schoolers would start to put their work and their resumes there. I think it's such a great place for companies to discover you. Jessica, how can we connect with you?
Yeah, so I also have LinkedIn, just Jessica Song, and I believe the URL is like Jessica Song 1002. You can also find me on Twitter. I have the username in like my name, but at Jessica Song with 1_.
All right. And by the way, Twitter is my number one spot. It's really a special place for educators, although we'd like to see more teachers there. Stephen, what about you?
Okay. So on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Steven10, Steven TEN, so STEVENTEN. And then also my full name, Stephen Tenholder. You can just Google it and you can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily.
I want to say, again, a huge thank you to the three of you. First of all, thank you for getting up so early on a Saturday morning. I want to say that to our high schoolers. I know that's a sacrifice for you, but thank you for sharing the activity, the learning, the vision that the three of you, and I know so many others are involved in. I know I've learned a lot today, and I'm excited to share some of this information with the high schoolers in my world, including a couple right here who are probably still sleeping. And I'm just excited about what the future holds for the three of you. So especially to Jessica and BJ, best of luck as you finish out your high school experience, and of course as you pursue some of these other amazing opportunities. It's just I'm excited to see what the future holds for you. And with that, I will say goodbye, take care, have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye, everyone.